where we're having the workshops at all. So those of you who remember, this workshop series started in '93 at Rutgers. It was conceived by Kurt Boyce, Jordan Cohn, Charles Wayne, and that crowd is still around guiding and directing our research. But the workshops have come a long way since then, and from working on switchboard and speech recognition, we've now grown to all aspects of human language technology. So it's a pleasure to welcome you all. I'll just keep my remarks to the bare minimum, just say that I'm going to mostly be doing just the timekeeping. I know we're starting about 10 minutes late because of our visual equipment. So because of that, let's just move the schedule back by 10 minutes and stick to it, so we'll be done by 11:40 instead of 11:30. Right? I'm Sanjeev Khudanpur, and along with Bill Byrne, we are happy to host the workshop, and also on behalf of Fred Jelinek, who's not here today, but who will be here in a couple of weeks. We start off today's program with a brief introduction to the workshop objectives by the two teams. So as you can see up there, there is one team led by Drago Radev working on multi-document summarization, another one by Jeff Pilms and Jeff Zweig on graphical models and speech recognition. So the way we've set it up is the team has about half an hour to kind of lay out the plans, and let's try to make this as interactive as possible, so I've left a good 10-15 minutes at the end for discussions. So without further ado, Drago, let's try to see if your stuff is working now.
Does this work? No?
Is the audio on? Maybe you can just use this.
Okay, welcome everybody. This year, as you know, there are only two teams, so I'll be happy to present what the first of those teams is going to be working on. So this team is supposed to build the best multi-document summarizer ever, and one that actually understands multiple languages. This is a big challenge, and we hope that in 6 weeks we'll have some interesting results. So let's see if this is going to show up. Okay. So the name of our topic has changed several times, and we have finally settled on automatic summarization for cross-lingual information retrieval. We try to avoid the use of multilingual summarization because nobody really knows what multilingual summarization really means. Does it mean that you take documents in multiple languages and then produce a summary in one of those languages? Does it mean that you start in one language and you produce summaries in multiple languages and so on? So to be totally clear, we decided to use cross-lingual, which means that you produce document summaries in one of the languages and you use the other language as a reference point or in some machine translation format. So very roughly what we're trying to do is verify some very interesting hypotheses about document summarization and information retrieval in a bilingual setup. So what you see here is a collection of documents, here DE, in English, and summaries of those documents which are produced either manually or automatically. So we come to the system with the query in English, and that query produces some sort of ranking of documents using an existing information retrieval. For now we're going to use the SMART system, a modified version of SMART. So one of the hypotheses that we're going to try to verify is whether good summaries will preserve document rankings. So we want to see if we produce a certain ranking using the information retrieval system with the full document, then we produce summaries either manually or automatically, whether that ranking is going to be preserved. So in a sense, we have two different experiments here. One has to deal with manual summaries. Those are summaries that we are going to build and which have already been partially built. And then summaries which have been produced by a variety of different methods, including the SMED system, which was developed at Michigan, and WebSum, which was developed at MITRE. So then the second step is to translate the query from English into Chinese, again, using both machine translation methods and manual translation. So what we do then is, independently of English, run the same Chinese query on the Chinese collection of documents and get a ranking of documents in Chinese. Then we summarize those documents independently of each other. So those are still single document summaries. We produce a ranking of the summaries in in Chinese, and then we compare those two rankings. Now, one thing that I should mention here is that we have access to a bilingual corpus, which is document aligned. It was provided to us by the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region through the LDC. That corpus contains 18,000 documents in both English and Chinese, which are translations of each other. So if we know that document 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in English, for example, is translation of document 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in Chinese, then we can infer that the rankings in the two different information retrieval systems are going to be preserved. Okay, so before I go on with the experiments that we're planning to do, let me introduce the participants on our team. So I'm Dragomir Radev. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Michigan. My colleague Wai Lam, there, associate professor, I believe, at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Simone Teufel, I don't see her, is she here? She's a research scientist at Columbia University. And Horacio Sajon, right there, from University of Sheffield, also a research scientist. We have 4 students, 2 undergraduate students. One is John Blitzer from Cornell, right there. Arda Çelebi from Bilkent University in Ankara, Turkey. Daniel Liu, right there, from Chinese University of Hong Kong. And Hong Shi from University of Michigan. According to Sanjeev, there'll be other people on our team. I don't know their names yet, so we'll find out this later. We also have the so-called consultants. Those are some people who have provided us with some software or some valuable advice, and I would like to mention just 2 of them. Xinyu Lin from University of Southern California Information Sciences Institute, who provided us with a couple of different summarizers, both for English and Chinese, single document, multi-document. And Inderjeet Mani, who provided us with a lot of data and another summarizer. We have been also in contact with the people participating in the so-called TIDES road mapping group. I will just open a parenthesis here to say what that is. So over the last couple of years, there was a major initiative called TIDES, that's for Translingual Information Detection, Extraction, and Summarization. And there are many universities that participate in this initiative. And one of the tasks in this evaluation is summarization. And this year, there was earlier in May and June, the first document understanding conference, which was affiliated with TIDES. And different systems participated in this evaluation to essentially compare their summarizers, again, both for multiple and single documents, but only in one language. So as part of this initiative, there was a so-called road mapping initiative, which was organized by all the participants in TIDES, plus a few other people. And the goal of this road mapping was to plan research and development in summarization over the next 5 to 10 years. One of the activities that was laid out in the roadmap was to build multi-document, multilingual summarizer, in our case, cross-lingual summarizers. So the people on the TIDES roadmap group are quite familiar with what we do, and several of them, I removed their names here for different reasons, who are supportive of this initiative. Okay, so now let me just go in a little bit more detail for the next 10 minutes of what we're planning to do. So again, we want to produce summaries of documents, both collections of single documents and multiple documents in 2 languages. And we want to compare 5 or 6 different algorithms. We want to evaluate the summarization and the translation components independently. So we have, again, translation of queries, translation of summaries, and translation of documents. We also want to compare different evaluation metrics, both for intrinsic and extrinsic summary evaluation. So those include things such as precision and recall, percent agreement, relative utility, and also some task-based evaluations, for example, question answering. We want to do something similar to what was done over the last few years at TREC in the ad hoc retrieval task, which is to establish a correlation between different evaluation metrics. The assumption is that if 2 evaluation metrics are correlated highly, then if one of them is more expensive, then you could just live with doing the second evaluation, which you can afford, and then extrapolate the results for the first evaluation. So we hope that we'll be able to establish such correlations in different methods for evaluating summaries. One of the objectives for the end of this workshop and perhaps later is to produce some sort of resource, hopefully distributed as a CD through LDC or through some other organization, which will include annotations to the Hong Kong News Corpus. For copyright reasons, we cannot redistribute the Hong Kong News Corpus. That is available to the LDC, to members of the LDC. However, we can produce a separate medium on which we're going to put all the different annotations. And those annotations include the queries, which we're working on right now, the sentence annotations for summaries for single and multiple documents, also the query relevance judgments for English and for Chinese. So the summarization techniques that we want to compare are multiple. One is the position method, which is probably the most widely used. The TF-IDF method, the centroid method. I don't want to go into detail about all those methods. Hopefully some of those were described during the tutorial last week that Inderjeet, Vasilis, Haji Vasiloglu, and Simona did on summarization. Largest common subsequence, that's a method that hasn't been used a lot. And also the keyword method, which has existed in many different forms, but nobody has linked it together with all the others to produce a coherent summarize. The evaluation metrics that we want to correlate are listed here. Some of those are intrinsic. That means that you look at some properties of the summary itself, for example, the length, the grammaticality, and so on. And the other set of evaluation metrics are extrinsic. Those are about some properties of the summary. For example, suppose that you have to classify some documents into 10 bins. What if, instead of reading the full documents, you only read the summary? Would you be able to perform at the same level in the classification task as if you had read the full documents? If yes, then you can assume that for this particular task, the summarizer did a good job. So the intrinsic evaluation metrics are percent agreement. This is used mostly in sentence extraction-based summarization. And the idea is that you build an ideal model summary based on multiple judges. In our case, we have 3 judges per document and per cluster of documents. And we want to see on which sentences does the summary that we produce automatically agree with the ideal summary produced by the judges. So in a sense, it's a precision and recall kind of metric, except that you don't penalize for sentences that neither the automatic or the manual summary has included. Relative utility is the most recent method, and that has to deal with the fact that people usually prefer to do continuous judgments on whether a certain piece of information should be in the summary. You realize that for percent agreement and for precision and recall, either a sentence is in a summary or it is not in a summary, whereas in relative utility, each sentence can have some sort of affinity score or utility score. So you can have some sort of inherent lattice built on all the sentences. And then it is possible to skip a sentence and include a different one which bears the same information content without losing the quality of the summary. And precision and recall is just what you're familiar with from information retrieval, how many of the sentences were correct and how many of the correct ones were retrieved. We also play with the length of documents and summaries. We want to see if longer documents are, for example, harder to summarize, whether summaries of a certain length are ideal, whether the length of the ideal summary depends somehow on the properties of the documents. Perhaps you want to have summaries of fixed length even though the documents are of different length, or perhaps you want to have some sort of a relative percentage. Okay, the corpus that was provided to us by the Hong Kong administrative region through the LDC is on Hong Kong news. Those were news written by the Hong Kong government, I believe over 3 years, 97 to 99. We have right now 18,000 documents and their translations, and a list of 40 queries in English and their translations. So we have manual translations, and we're also going to have automatic translations. I want to mention here that the LDC is actually our subcontractor who does all those annotations. So before the workshop we have right now about 18 or 17 or 18 of the 40 queries, and LDC has promised to deliver 4 per week over the next 4 weeks, which should be totally adequate for our research. So what LDC is providing is a set of document relevance judgments for the 40 queries. Essentially what that means is what are the most relevant documents given a query. Then the sentence relevance judgments. So to do this, what you need to do is cluster the documents into groups on the same topic. For example, all the articles about the jockey club, or all the articles about the weather reports, and so on and so forth. Then, for each of those clusters, you define a topic for the cluster, and you decide which information in the entire cluster is most pertinent to that topic. For example, each article contains, in addition to the factual information, some background information, some side quotes, and so on. And depending on the centrality of those phrases, you may or may not want to include them in the summary. We don't have at the moment manual abstracts, and that's something that we are considering building for at least some of the clusters. Okay, so how were the judgments created? Well, we essentially send queries to an IR engine, and we get back the documents which the IR engine considers are relevant. Then those documents are filtered by a human who decides whether there is a certain number of hits. That means we don't want clusters with a single document, nor do we want clusters which have 30 or 40 documents, because at least in the literature so far, nobody has been able to show that summarization of such large clusters is any useful. In more detail, for each of the 100 documents that are considered relevant by the information retrieval system, a human sits in and decides whether those are indeed relevant. And for those that are indeed relevant, they're marked as such and given to us as raw data. There is also another category of documents that are briefly relevant. This is a category that was also used in the different versions of TREC over the years. So a document is considered to be briefly related to a topic if it contains no more than 10% of its content on that topic. So for each of the topics, what we get is all the relevant documents, and also a certain number of spurious, irrelevant documents which are manually introduced in the cluster, so that the system wouldn't know ahead of time some a priori probability of a document being relevant. Then for each of the top 100 documents in the 40 clusters, what LDC is building is a set of sentence relevance judgments. So again, we consider the subset of those 100 documents which are on the topic. If there are more than 10, we only take 10 of those at random. And for each of those, LDC produces a set of relative utility judgments. So again, each sentence is ranked from 0 to 10 depending on how central it is to the topic of the cluster. Okay, so the experiments in more detail. The first experiment is that we want to see if preservation of ranking is any good. We don't know. Nobody has done this kind of experiment before. We want to see, again, if summaries preserve ranking. And summaries built using different methods preserve ranking compared to each other. Then the second and third experiment have to do with, they all assume that the first experiment is going to be successful. And what we want to do is see how query translation, the summarization components, and the monolingual information retrieval affect the performance. So what we're going to do is do, for example, pairwise comparisons with manual translation of the query versus automatic translation of the query, and so on. Okay, so now the monolingual experiments are for English queries versus compared to English documents. That's one ranking. Another ranking is English queries and English summaries. And those are the two rankings that we want to compare. So this is the first experiment, comparing those rankings against those. And this essentially would tell us what is the effect of the summarization component on preservation of ranking. The second is to compare Chinese document rankings against Chinese summary rankings, and then do the same kind of experiment with Chinese. Then what we want to do also is compare some baseline summary methods, for example, the lead sentences summary. It has been shown in the literature that for at least certain genres of text, taking just the first few sentences of a document produces a summary as good as any automatically produced summary. We want to see if this is valid for the kind of data that we have. Ideally, what we want to see is how rankings are preserved between manual summaries and documents. So at this point, we don't have manual summaries, and we haven't decided whether we'll have time to produce those. Okay, so there are a few more monolingual experiments. I will mention just briefly another experiment, which is cross-lingual. And that in that case, what we do is we translate the query from one language to the other, and then retrieve documents in that other language. So you can imagine a situation where you're faced with a collection of Chinese documents and you don't speak Chinese. So you type in a query in English, that query is automatically translated, you get back the documents, and all those documents are summarized. And then you want to see, without knowing that language, if the summaries are any good. Okay, so timeline, over the last, I would say 7-8 weeks, we have been extensively working with LDC to produce most of that data that we will need, and so far we've been quite happy with what we are getting. We hope that they will deliver everything on time. So the corpus, again, was already there, the 18,000 documents. However, all the sentence and document relevance judgments, the queries themselves, and all the spurious documents were produced over the last 6 to 7 weeks. We have also started, actually most of this software has already been installed and ported to the Johns Hopkins systems for sentence segmentation in English and Chinese, Chinese tokenization. So this is a component which identifies words in a continuous stream without any spaces. Machine translation, that I'm not sure if we have at this point, but that's something that is going to be part of it. IR system, which is smart, as ported to Chinese by WISE team. The Mead summarizer, which was developed at Michigan over the last 2 years, which recently was, at least John started porting it to Chinese. I don't know how far he is with this. Now, the workshop itself, what we're trying to do is to finalize the Chinese summarizer, at least the Mead Chinese summarizer, and to integrate all those components together, and to build a toolkit which would facilitate the performance of different sorts of experiments and evaluations as outlined earlier. And then all the different stages that you would expect in a 6-week workshop, all different iterations until some sort of final version of a system. And here I have a working name for the system. This is based on the earlier name of our workshop, which was something like cross-lingual information access. However, obviously this, we're going to find some very nice name, and we would be happy to accept some suggestions from you once you see the system working. I don't want to go into detail on all those steps here, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. So that's my introduction.
Hardcore IR person, but can you tell me what the issues were and what you decided to do about it? There was something about whether issues.
Okay, so I believe that what you're referring to is that at some point the LDC was saying that they couldn't produce as many queries as we wanted because it would take them too much time. And what we did is find some compromise solution which allows them to produce as many queries as we want. And what that solution entails is that we run a clustering system, actually a system that participated in the TDT evaluation a couple of years ago, and we produce some sort of baseline clusters of related documents. And then LDC starts from each of those clusters and validates, in a sense, that documents in that cluster are on the same topic. If they're not, then they're marked as irrelevant. If they are, they're marked as relevant, and so on. But in a sense, everybody at LDC, including Chris, whom I met yesterday in Toulouse, and Stephanie, who's actually the manager of this project there, said that that actually helped them a lot, and because of that, they're able to produce as many queries as we want.
And what I don't understand is, why is this a compromise? I mean, what would you have them do otherwise if they had all the time in the world?
Well, what they wanted to do is do what they typically do for track kind of queries. That is, they just start with a document at random from the entire collection, and they say, okay, let's see, Jockey Club. Okay, so this is going to be our topic. Then they type Jockey Club in their search engine. They retrieve a certain number of documents, which can be large, like 200 or 500. You know, jockey is a big thing in Hong Kong. So they would start looking at all those documents one at a time and decide whether they're relevant or not. Now, in this case, they already know that most of the relevant documents on that particular topic are already clustered together. So that's a lot less work. And it's a compromise because you would want to do it the way that they wanted to do it, because that, in a sense, provides a little bit more clean data. So there's a little bit less bias as to which documents should be put together. So that's why I call it a compromise.
So in the relevance judgments that you have right now, if there was a relevant document clustering did not make it into the correct cluster.
It would still be included.
Okay.
So here's how it works. We produce clusters. And let's say there's a cluster with 30 documents on the jockey clock. They look at all of those. They mark a certain number of those as relevant, others as irrelevant, some as brief. And then if they don't find enough for our needs, which is at least, at maximum 10, what they do is they run then their search engine and try to get more documents, and they add them to the cluster.
So something which got left out in the first stage still has a chance of making it.
Yes, what happens actually most typically is that our system produces two clusters on pretty much the same topic, which using a different threshold would be merged together. And in that case, what they discover is that some of the documents on the jockey club are in cluster 1 and some are in cluster 10, and they would merge them together.
But the formulation of the query itself was done the way it is done in Trek, or was
Yeah, they formulate the query based on a sample of the documents in the cluster. Any questions? Okay.
Yep. We're up for a break, so if you guys want, we'll take a 20-minute break. Is that what we're planning for? Okay. Break or keep going? Let's take a vote. If you're still fresh, we'll just keep going right through. Okay, those for a break. 1. Well, since Jeff is our next speaker, I have a feeling that if he wants a break, we have to have a break. Okay, those for keep going. Many more keep going. Okay, so let's keep going then. Jeff, you're on next. While Jeff is setting up, let me put up one other slide, which is also a long workshop tradition, at least of the last 6 years. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, I think Laura will tell you when she tells you other things about how serious this rule is. Right? Okay, Jeff.
Can I So that's the end of my talk. Are there any questions? Okay. Let's see if this works. Okay, we're online. So I'm going to give an overview of our team's research plans for the next 6 weeks. But I'd like to start out first by saying that I just want to thank both Sanjeev and Bill for essentially putting this workshop together. I think that they've done a fantastic job in having this thing become a reality and helping me to iron out all of the things that everybody wanted to do. And in general, it's basically been a real pleasure working with them over the past couple of weeks. And I'd also like to thank Jack Godfrey and Jim Bass and all of the people from the sponsor organizations who have made this a possibility and a reality. Without them, again, this wouldn't be happening. So my name is Jeff Bilms, and I'm co-leading the graphical model team along with Jeff Zweig. And I thought we'd spend a little bit of time just doing member introductions. Jeff, I don't see Jeff here right now, but maybe we could go down the list. There's Tom Richardson, who's right there, and he's at the University of Washington, Department of Statistics. There's Kirk Jackson, and he's at NSA. There's Karen Levescu at MIT. Peng Tu, who's right there here at JHU. Eva Holtz, right there, and she's from Harvard. And there's Kareem Filali, Kareem, way in the back of the room. Eric Sandus from SpeechWorks, who's sitting right here near Sanjeev. Jerry Torres from Stanford. And finally, Bill Byrne, who everyone knows Bill. So, okay. So, what essentially this brief talk will be about is essentially the motivation behind what it is that we're doing. And at the very end, we'll talk about the specific workshop goals, and we'll give a timeline. So basically, what we're trying to do is the following 3 things. Jeff Zweig and I have been, over the past 6 or 7 weeks, developing a new graphical model-based toolkit that's optimized for automatic speech recognition and other time series modeling. And our goal is to use this toolkit, which is, it's an alpha release at this point, but we want to use it and actually start using it for real speech recognition experiments. But more so than just using graphical models, in particular, what we're primarily interested in is determining the structure automatically from data. Because we feel that just specifying a graphical model by hand without letting the data help us in any way isn't going to be the most likely path to a success. And even more specifically, we believe that the way to structure the model is discriminatively, whereby the models themselves have some sort of, they represent the intrinsic and unique properties about, you can think of it as each word has its own separate model, which is unique to that word. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But first, let's talk about what graphical models are. Some of us might have never heard of them. So I like the quote by Mike Jordan, who's one of the leading researchers in the field, who said that graphical models are essentially a marriage between graph theory and probability theory. And so what that means is we use graphs, which are basically circles and arrows, to describe certain formal and abstract properties of probability distributions. And in particular, the graph corresponds to lists of conditional independent statements. And this is an important thing, because with a graph, you can very quickly and concisely describe a very large family of probability distributions with only a very small amount of effort. So when you're trying to model, and this is irrespective of what it is that you're trying to model, whether you're trying to model articulator variables, or whether you're trying to model phonemes or syllables, or anything, they can all be described in this way where you're trying to understand the statistical relationships between the variables that you're using. Secondly, graphical models give us a set of algorithms that will allow us to, as efficiently as possible, produce programs that can efficiently compute probabilities on these graphs. So if, for example, we were to just say, here's a big, giant joint probability density function, let's compute some probabilities, it might take weeks. Whereas if we represent it in a graph and feed the graph to these standard sets of algorithms that have been developed over the years, it's possible to do this in much less time. So graphs have been used for a number of different problems already in speech recognition. Here's an example of a graph that's useful to describe classifier combination. So we're not going to go into the details of what each of these graphs mean, but this is an example of how a graph can be used to describe something that has been found to be an important part of speech recognition. For example, Rover is a scheme for combining multiple speech recognition systems together to produce a final result. And in general, classifier combination is a method whereby you combine different systems together to produce a result that works better than any of the individual classifiers themselves. And here's a graph that can describe the statistics behind the process of classifier combination. Another model that I find kind of interesting is the stochastic segment model. So the stochastic segment model is a model that has been proposed as an alternative to the hidden Markov model in speech recognition. And it's, in some cases, difficult to describe, but I think that with a graph, you can actually describe the relationships between the underlying random variables that exist in the stochastic segment model and come up with a more intuitive explanation of what's going on. But of course, the most famous model for speech recognition is the hidden Markov model. And just as easily as anything else, you can use a graph to describe precisely what statistically is going on behind a hidden Markov model. Okay. But our key point, one of our key points, is that hidden Markov models really occupy only a very small region in the graphical model space. And so what we believe is by going to a more powerful set of statistical techniques, we should be able to break out of the HMM mold and come up with a model that works much better. So here are a number of reasons why we think that graphical models should be used for automatic speech recognition. Well, one, that we already saw, that a hidden Markov model is only one instance of a graphical model. Two, that it's possible. So we said that the graph is essentially a visual language for describing probability distributions. Once you learn how to speak in that language, it's very easy to communicate quickly statistical ideas. You can write down a graph and say, oh, I see what that means, or someone else can say, maybe that's wrong, maybe you should add something else. And something that ordinarily might take several pages of equations might be very quickly and concisely represented with a graph. So that essentially means we can rapidly specify new models for automatic speech recognition. But of course, we need the right and computationally efficient tools. And so this is the reason for Jeff and I to have been developing this toolkit over the past couple of months for speech recognition. Another reason for graphical models in speech is that the structure learning algorithms, which have been used traditionally in the graphical models community but have not really been used to determine the statistical model in speech, can actually be applied here. And it can let the data essentially tell us more than just what the parameters of the model should be. So by determining the structure, that's a completely different thing. And I believe also that with the right kinds of structure learning procedures, we have the chance to improve recognition while concentrating the modeling power of that model on what the most important thing is, which is, in our case, discriminability. Because what we're really doing, what is our game? Our game is classification. And so we want models that can discriminate one word from another word. Or the E set is a good example in speech recognition. And finally, I think that once we come up with a structure that works well, I believe that just by looking at the graph, because the graph is going to be over things that we are familiar with, like articulatory variables, the structure over the graph should tell us something about speech and language. I would be surprised if there's nothing that it comes back and gives us. And there might be sort of a reverse information flow from the data back to our high-level knowledge. But the basic bottom line is the graphical model space is so large, and the automatic speech recognition and HMM technology is such a small portion that I'd really be surprised if, given here's the space of graphical models and here's where we are in automatic speech recognition, if there's not something else out there that in this space of graphical models that ends up being a useful point for us to start exploring. So, what are we going to do for the next 6 weeks? Well, one piece of work that I'm particularly interested in is looking at starting out with some of the work that Jeff Zweig has done in using graphical models for speech, where he represented both phone variables and articulatory hidden variables and had observation streams like MFCCs or other features, and using a graph to actually represent the different relationships between these things and learning these things. But in that case, the model itself was fixed. There was no structure learning. And our goal is twofold. One is to actually learn the structure from the data, and two, to learn the structure in this discriminative way. So the reason for doing that is, again, severalfold. One is to improve the parsimony, because ideally if you have enough data and you have a maximum likelihood model, it should be possible to learn everything that you need to learn. But given that we want speech recognition to work in a relatively small amount of memory and to work on your PDA and to not require lots of power and not require lots of computational resources, we essentially want model parsimony. So we should have these models, the graphs, essentially represent only what is most important. And one way of doing this is to have the graphical models represent only essentially the unique dependencies in each class, and not those common dependencies across classes that don't help classify different speech sounds. So there's a pictorial representation of what that means that might be useful. So let's suppose that we're interested in discriminating between two types of visual objects. On the left-hand side, we have key-like objects that have rings, and on the right-hand side, we have key-like objects that have horizontal bars. So one possibility would be to come up with statistical models that represent all of every such object on both sides, both the left and right side. But as you can see, there's a common feature here. This horizontal bar here and the horizontal bars there are common to both classes. So it seems just intuitively that representing that horizontal bar for both class-specific models is somewhat redundant. And for doing classification, we can say, well, let's just remove all of the parameters that are associated with this common bit and only represent those properties that are unique to each class. So here, in this case, we only represent the circles and we only represent the diagonal bars. So imagine now that these, instead of visual objects, were auditory objects, like words. And imagine taking two words and stripping out the common aspects of those words and leaving only the residual, and then representing only those residual parts of each word. That is essentially what we're trying to do. So from a graph point of view, I mean, one way of getting an idea of what might happen in a graphical model when we're modeling the unique properties is the idea of edge removal. So in this case, let's say that this graph describes objects of type 1, and this graph on the right describes objects of class 2. So one way of thinking about it might be that, well, what about if we remove the common edges? Now, I'm not saying that removing the common edges is what we want to do, but this is just an illustrative example of what might happen. In this case, we're only representing dependencies between variables that are unique within each class-specific model. And what you get are, of course, much simpler models than you do when you have the original models. But at the same time, you have something that should do roughly as well, if not better, because of the parameter estimation procedures that follow. So buried Markov models were one example of doing exactly this. essentially a buried Markov model was an approach where you add dependencies that are conditioned on the individual hidden state sequence, and the dependencies switch. They change depending on what the state sequence was. And the state sequence, of course, corresponded to what word sequence you're using. So the idea is then that you represented the unique dependencies across observations specific for each state sequence. So what we want to do then is start from a BMM and from a Zweig model and produce discriminatively data-derived switching models, or what I'm calling buried Zweig models. And the idea here is, again, that we have some underlying backbone which might represent phonemes. We have articulatory variables, but now we have switching discriminative structure over the set of articulatory variables that exists conditioned on, again, the state sequence. And then again we have switching dependencies across feature streams, and we have multiple feature streams because we're not interested just in MFCCs, but we're interested in other feature streams as well. So I just want to say a little bit about features. So my belief is that HMMs are basically like a round hole, and MFCCs are like a round peg. And MFCCs fit very nicely in the HMM hole. But it's often the case that people try novel features. But the novel features are basically trying, in many cases, to fit a square peg into a round hole. So it might very well be the case that people have spent an enormous amount of time with optimizing MFCCs for HMMs. It might be the case that novel features, while being valid, don't necessarily work well with HMMs. So I think one way of viewing this is that we have this discriminatively structured, data-driven, self-adjusting graphical model hole. And you might have some set of features, some novel features which have some arbitrary shape. We don't know what the shape is, but we have a belief that these novel features are useful. But because we have data-driven and discriminatively structured models, we might essentially determine the appropriately shaped hole to fit the features in. So we come up with a model that matches the features that we are representing speech with. And that's essentially why I think we need features more than just MFCCs. So as I said before, Jeff and I have been working on a new graphical model toolkit that's optimized both for speech recognition and time series. And we have an alpha version working, it's running, and we actually used it during the tutorial on Friday. And our long-term goal in this, however, is to not only use this workshop, use the toolkit during this workshop, but the workshop is also going to be sort of a starting point where we can get bugs and find out what are the things that we need that are missing, or what are the things that are redundant that we can remove, and ultimately release it and make it public domain and open source so it's available for anybody to use. And here's an example of essentially this graphical model textual language that we developed for describing one of these models. So you have declarations of variables, like a variable called state, and you can give it a type and say, for example, it's discrete, and give it a cardinality. You can give it different types of parents, and this all corresponds to a graph. So you can essentially take a graph, type in the graph according to this language, and then run it, and everything starts running. And this is what is running now and what we're using for the workshop. So finally, here are our plans for the workshop procedure. So we have 6 weeks, okay, and we're breaking it up into roughly 1.5-week chunks. So the first week and a half will consist of the following steps. So on the one hand, we're going to be working on developing the scripts for doing the structure learning over the observations, the discriminative structure learning over the observations. And at the same time, we're working on hidden articulatory, sort of a baseline hidden articulatory Markov models with novel features and the toolkit. So I should say we have a baseline already but basically what we want is to develop the articulatory baseline during the first week and a half, which essentially produces something like a Zweig model. Then the next week and a half, we use the scripts that induce the structure to deduce the discriminative structure over the observations on this hidden articulatory Markov model. And that then produces a BZM, Baird-Zweig model. And at the same time, we developed the scripts for doing hidden structure learning. So we saw that in that one graph that there were both structure over the hidden variables and over the observed variables. So this sort of happens there. So then in the third week and a half, we actually used the procedures to deduce the discriminative structure of the hidden variables that have come from this graph here, which we're calling an HBZM, hidden Baird-Zweig model. And the name might change. I reserve the right to change the name of that one. And at the same time, we tune the various scripts and maybe make some modifications based on the results that have come in and figure out what's right and what's wrong and so on. And finally, the last week and a half, we were going to combine these different systems together and hopefully get the best, maybe something that works better than all of them, and at the same time, analyze the results that we have and start doing the write-ups and prepare for the grand finale, which I guess occurs at the end of the 6 weeks. So that's the end of the presentation. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer any of them. Andy?
Something about the corpus.
Mm-hmm. All right, so yes, the corpus that we're using several different corpus for different, you have to make me say corpus in plural. So for different experiments. So we're using both the Aurora noisy digits corpus. We're also using, we're going to be working on the spine corpus. And there's also a corpus internal to IBM, the audio video corpus, which exists here as well, which consists of features containing both regular MFCC features, but also contains parsed visual features that have face tracking, and that's a good thing for feature tracking. And we're also using features from that were developed by Eagle Brandman for some of the Aurora noisy digits corpus tasks. And so we're going to be using bits and pieces of these different corpuses as the workshop proceeds. Okay. Thank you very much.
How many people want to break now? All right. So let's take a 20-minute break, and then we'll resume. There are lots of important administrative things that all of you need to know. So don't go away, otherwise you'll be the one who'll have to put up with not knowing what you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to get what you need. So please stay on after the 20-minute break, and Laura and Jacob will tell you a few other things. And she's the real boss around here. So you'll soon find out that if you need to get anything done, you can go to Bill or come to me, and we'll say, yeah, we'll have it done for you. But eventually, when it comes to the bottom line, the person who does it for you is Laura. So whatever she's going to tell you is far more important than anything that I or Bill would tell you. Please listen to it carefully. And she'll also introduce you to a lot of the support staff and all the organizational part that we've set up for you to make this workshop roaringly successful. So, Laura.
Good morning and welcome, everybody. If you ask me any questions, I'll probably immediately turn them over to our student assistant. So I'm really not the one who's going to get things done for you. They are. And I'm actually thrilled to have them here because they are doing the meat of all the work the past couple of weeks and for the next 6 weeks. Wash your coffee mugs. Okay, so very quickly I will tell you that most of the activities that are going to take place over the next 6 weeks are going to be in Barton Hall. Some of you have been there, some of you haven't. We have a computer lab set up. We have a lecture room, which probably will mostly be used for team meetings. And we also have a lounge set up with tables and sofas and chairs where you can just kind of hang out and relax. There's also a refrigerator in there where you can stash some food if you want to. As I mentioned, I want to introduce to you now the students who are going to be also around helping you out in the back row. Aaron Sachs, Smita Raman, and Matt Marsh. Matt's our webmaster. And also in the back is Nicole Bowling. She will be assisting me with travel reimbursements and stipends and paperwork and stuff like that. If you have any questions about Hopkins, about things that are going on in the workshop, if you need to know how to get somewhere, Smita and Aaron can definitely help you out with that. Next, travel reimbursements. You should have gotten in your blue welcome folders a brown envelope with your name on it and I think a place to put your social security number. If you want to put all your travel reimbursement receipts in there, please make sure that you turn all of them in at one time, and that way we'll just have to process one form for you. You can bring those to Nicole up in room 320 in Barton Hall, and we will get those checks processed and pass them on to you when we get them back from the accounts payable department. The per diem and the stipend will kind of happen on a scheduled basis. The per diem checks are scheduled to be given out, the next one on July 20th, and then August 3rd and August 17th. So you'll receive those on Friday afternoons. We kind of will have an afternoon social gathering and we'll give the checks out then. The stipend will be given out on the last day, the 17th. Next item, it's all in capital letters because it's very important, is security issues. The computer lab that is set up in Barton Hall will be open during the day, Monday through Friday, and either Aaron or Smita will be in there all the time for assistance. But on the off hours, the door will be closed and locked. And you do have access, you will have access through a side entrance to there. You'll have a key to the stairway and a number combination lock to get into the lab on off hours. What I would like to remind you is that you shouldn't leave any personal belongings in there. Other people do have access to the room. We've tried to eliminate that somewhat, but we can't keep everybody out of there, so you definitely don't want to keep any personal belongings in there, as well as you don't want to keep any in the lounge, because that room is going to be open pretty much 24 hours a day so that you can get into it, but there won't be really anybody monitoring your items, and a lot of other people are in and out of this building even though it is the summer. Also, on the security line, if you need transportation back to either the Broadview or the Colonnade, there is a van that kind of drives around campus, and if you call them, they will come and meet you and take you back over there if you're here late at night or very early in the morning. The computer lab is set up right now for everybody to do their work in. Everybody will have their own individual computer. There is a file cabinet in there between the stations that each of you can keep files, etc., papers if you want to, and those do have keys to them. We are scheduled to break down that computer room on the morning of August 17th, so we would encourage you to have all of your work done and completed by the end of the day on the 16th or very early on the 17th, so that we can box up the computers, break down the furniture, so that we can return that room to its normal state for use during the academic year. If you require any computer access after, say, 10 o'clock Friday morning, either let me know or let Jacob Latterman know, and we can try and make some arrangements for you. There are telephones in the lab, not in the lab, well, there are some in the lab, but also in the lounge for your use for outgoing calls. You can make local calls from there. There are, I think, telephone books in there and some other brochures about the Baltimore area. You can also obviously call anywhere on campus. If you need to make a long distance call, it is set up to take a credit card number so that you can make long distance calls. If you want to have any incoming calls, there is a phone in the lab that will be manned either by Smita or Aaron, and they can take phone messages for you And if you're not in the lab at the time, then they'll leave a message in the mailboxes that are set up for you in the lab. We do have a photocopier up in the lab in Barton 320. The one that's in the computer lab on the first floor, it belongs to the electrical and computer engineering department, and that is not for our use. So if you need to make photocopies, use the one up on the third floor. If you need copies made, Smita or Aaron can do that for you, or if you can't find them, bring them to me and I can take care of it as well. We will try to post daily, a daily schedule for you for different events that are going on. On Wednesdays, we'll have lectures. Friday afternoons, we'll have some social events. Thursday evenings, I think, are planned for voluntary evening meals as a group. So as those plans become a little more definite, we will post them down on the board in front of the lab and also put some flyers up in the lounge and on the glass cased bulletin board across from the men's room on the first floor. And they'll probably also be posted on the website. We have a conference room upstairs on the third floor that can also be used if you need a space for a team meeting or another group meeting. If you would like to schedule use of that, if you could let Smita or Aaron know when you want to use it and how long you need to use it, we'll make sure that everybody gets accommodated. Starting tomorrow, we will set up some snack breaks for you in the afternoon, probably around 3 o'clock, 3:30. They'll be set up in the lounge, so when you're kind of finished your work, your research, feel free to stop in the lounge for cookies and refreshments, etc. And as I mentioned already, we have some meals planned on Wednesdays when we have guest lecturers. We will also have a catered lunch immediately following the lecture. Those will also be set up in the lounge, which is Barton Hall, room 117. And again, on Thursday evenings, to be determined, everybody is welcome to get together for some group dinners at some area restaurants. So again, we'll let you know when those are planned. If you need to receive any incoming mail here, if you need people to forward you things from home or from school, the address where it can be sent should be in your welcome folder, and that mail will come to us and we'll distribute it and put it in your mailboxes in the computer lab. Most of you, or at least the students, have already received keys for Barton Hall and for the stairway. The faculty people, if you still need to get keys, I will look for you this afternoon and give you the keys that you need. What I'll have you do is just initial a sheet that says that you picked up certain keys, and then we'll collect them back on the 17th and just make a note that you returned them. We have arranged usage for some other facilities on campus. The library is available for your use. You can go in and take a look at books. If you're interested, if you know now that you will want to check books out to use while you're here, there is a form in your blue folders that you need to fill out and bring back to Smita or Aaron, and then we will forward those to the library, and I believe you'll need to get a J card issued to actually check them out. So if you do want to do that, just fill out that form and bring it to us, and then we'll follow through from there. I had mentioned to the students a couple of weeks ago that the athletic center is currently undergoing renovations and expansion, and that it was not available. We have found out since that that actually is not the case. They do have some very limited facilities, some exercise equipment that's available. If you're interested in gaining access to the athletic center, if you could let Smita or Aaron know, we'll put a list together of everybody and then find out from them what the hours of operation are and exactly what they have available. I don't think it'll be much more than what's available at the Broadview or the Colonnade.
I know exactly.
Go ahead.
It's just, all they have is a small weight room, which is just small, it's just a small weight room. They have some treadmills, like very limited number of treadmills, but they do have like gyms, like there's 2 gyms, they want to play basketball, something like that. So that's all there is.
Okay, the pool's not available, right?
Pool's not.
Okay. Also on campus there is a bank over actually just in the next building. It's the bank that your stipend checks and your per diem checks are drawn on, so you can go and cash them there as long as you have a photo ID. The people over at the bank have a list of names of attendees, so they are expecting that you'll probably stop by at some point. And as you probably noticed on your travels over from the Broadview and the Colonnade, we are still undergoing some outdoor renovations as well, and there is still some construction going on. As far as I know, that is going to be limited to the spaces that you've already seen, so you should be able to take the same route over here for the next 6 weeks. If we get any updates on that or if any new projects begin, we'll let you know. That's all that I have. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, great. Oh, I didn't remind you, I didn't tell you why you need to wash your coffee mugs. And I didn't mention about the coffee station. There is a coffee station set up in the basement of Barton Hall. It's an espresso machine. There are supplies down there. There's milk down there. If anything there runs out, again, let's meet on Aaron know. Obviously, they're going to be really busy this summer. And let them know they can replenish it for you. There are coffee mugs downstairs for your use, but please wash them out. And actually, I think there's a marker down there that you can put your names on the bottom. That way, you can use the same one for the next 6 weeks. We're trying to kind of keep it a little bit straight, but we don't get down there often, so if you can keep up with your own, at least your own coffee mug, that'll help us alleviate some of the mess. That area is not just for workshop people, it's used by a lot of other people in the building, so we want to keep it as clean as possible. Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Jacob, who is going to tell you about the computer information.
Morning, everyone. I'm never used to talking in front of large crowds. I always converse to people via email. There are roughly 4 people that haven't logged in, so everyone else already knows mostly what's going on and have your accounts enabled. Those 4 people should find me at the next break, and we can get your accounts enabled. The web server does seem to be having problems, and I'm building a replacement for it. Hopefully the changeover will be nearly seamless so that you won't notice the difference. But right now it does seem that the help desk software isn't working, so I've changed it so that the help button works, where if you just email to help, it'll get to myself and the staff, and also to Matt Marsh. There is also a confusing problem on the Linux systems where compiling seems to work across the board from A02, but not from other systems. So the cross compiles don't work. But hopefully we'll have that straightened out by the end of the week also. I have 2 assistants, Peng Fei, who's here in the back today, and he'll be working mostly in the evenings, hopefully as late as people are here. And also Ashima is here on the weekends. She'll be here Saturdays and Sundays, something like 9 to 4. So hopefully when you have critical questions, you can refer them to them when I'm not here. All of you have seen the main web pages, and within the web pages is this one, the help page. A lot of people have been coming to me with very simple questions that are really answered within those help pages, and especially this line. The FAQ pages have been rebuilt, and they're rather comprehensive. And if you could look at them before sending off help, they're very helpful, and will save you a lot of time because you can get to those faster than you can get to me or my assistants. There are some leftovers and legacy errors in them, but most of them have been corrected. And that's it for my bullet points. Any questions? Everybody's all set to the system. Sanjeev? Who's next?
All right, again, once more, wash your coffee cups. Before I conclude, of course, there's one very important thing that I missed out, which I'll put right back on track. You all wouldn't be here, this whole workshop wouldn't be happening without the support of the US government, the National Science Foundation, and as they say, if you follow the money, the Department of Defense, DARPA, and other agencies. So on behalf of all of them, I have Jack Godfrey, who would probably want to say a few words to you. And we were also expecting Jim Bass from DARPA, but it looks like he didn't make it, so Jack will speak for all of them. Jack?
I don't really have any formal remarks to make. Just happy to welcome you all, and hope that you'll enjoy yourselves and do good work in the long tradition of the summer workshops. I was just reflecting on the way here. One of the unique things about this workshop, and I think one of the reasons I enjoy seeing it function the way it does, is that it's a peculiar combination of bottom-up and top-down R&D that you don't see very often. You know, we're used to the European model of R&D, which is sort of top-down, engineering-oriented, and that's pretty much all we do in the Defense Department is here's our problem, who would like to be paid to solve it? And at NSF, which really provides a lot more of this support for the workshop than I do, and they ought to be speaking, NSF has a more of a bottom-up thing. If you have a real smart idea, it'll get funded somewhere. We'll just find the right program. And the workshop, because of the very nice mechanism that Fred Jelinek has devised for coming up with topics and assembling teams and so forth, has a real nice bottom-up flavor. That is to say, the people that he pulls together are a pretty wide representative bunch from speech and language. Their ideas are vetted by their peers, largely. Of course, they're on topic in a general sense, which is the top-down direction that you might say they get from the government sources. But I think you should enjoy the luxury of working in a kind of a bottom-up environment where the ideas that you're working on and the projects that you're working on have bubbled up from below by smart people bringing them to a place where the government had the opportunity to fund it, and we're happy to do that. It's a lot more fun to watch that kind of work being done than it is the more directed type of research that our typical contracts are. So that's my main message. I did have a short reflection on something Jeff said. I'd like to reinforce. I think it was in line with his idea that there's probably something else out there. He also, and in his search for a structural discriminability in the graphical models, we recently had an experience in our shop, which some of you may know about. You certainly will in time. We had a very big breakthrough in speaker ID, where we lowered the equal error rate for speaker identification in a certain type of a task by a factor of 10 in 1 year. And the reason for that was really largely serendipitous. It was people reusing tools that they had used before for a different purpose. It was actually the use of a language identification algorithm to identify speakers that was one of the components of the breakthrough. And that's because the language identification tool happened to be doing very good acoustic state identification, but it was masked by all the pronunciation problems in speech recognition. When you took away the speech recognition problem and reused it for another purpose, it turned out to have an ability to do phonetic discrimination that was as useful in searching for different speakers and their differences in pronunciation as it had been in searching for different languages. So I urge you to keep an eye out for things that you may not even have expected, but which could turn out to be real jewels for another workshop someday, or for application to any of the other problems the government's interested in: speaker identification, speech recognition, and so forth. And so I encourage you to work hard, but also have fun, get to know one another, and I look forward to hearing about the results at the end of August. Thanks.
Right. Are there any other comments, suggestions, jokes? No? Okay. All right, in that case, let's conclude this meeting and march back to the lab where Jacob will set up. Oh, there is a comment. Or is that a joke?
It's a joke.
Okay.
Should we wash our coffee?
Let me see. Yes. All right, so let's adjourn and go to the lab and get going. Thanks.